It is with a profound joy that I introduce to the Warrior Within podcast Sam Crosby, who's a storyteller. I've and many other things as well, as we'll soon find out. That I've we've crossed paths a little bit over the years, but only more recently have kind of come into full contact, so to speak. And it's a real joy to enter into a conversation with you today, brother. So welcome.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks, Asher. And you've already kicked it off into the imaginal with the name of the podcast, the Warrior, the Warrior, the Warrior. Yeah, really excited to see where this conversation goes, man.
Yeah. Well, let's start by just asking where do we find you in the world right now?
So geographically, I am in Cornwall, southwest England, and I am in a little village. Um, I mean, I've got the words in my mouth ready to go, but I still guard them carefully, just to stay near the magic of them. That my parents lived here when I was born, lived in this village 36 years ago, and I didn't know that when I moved here. So there's something in the water. Yeah, they moved away when I was a little under two, and then I found my way back here by hook and by crook. There's no rhyme or reason to it other than something bigger than me. Yeah, so I'm just up the road from Holywell Bay, one of the most gorgeous beaches down the road there. Yeah,
That's amazing, man. I already have lots of questions coming up. Even the name
yeah,
Holywell, I'm sure there's some lovely
yeah.
stories and significance behind that. But yeah, and
Yeah,
well,
well,
we
I'll give you an image. The image is that there's a mineral sort of multi-tiered mineral thing deposit collection point in a cave, and the story goes that there used to be crutches lining the exit of that cave from where people went in with ailments and came out without. So that's the story of the place. Yeah.
wow. Well, that's a great image right off the top,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and you mentioned the geographical coordinates. Well, what about what's alive in your heart right now, man?
Hmm. Yeah, good question. Good question. I mean, yeah, the word warrior hit me right at the start, as you said it, and there's something about, yeah, I've even been afraid of archetypes. You're working with story, working with storytelling. I held archetypes at arm's length for a couple of years so that I could stay within the mythic and let it be expansive without telling it what it is. Martin Shaw loves to say, "Don't stretch it on the lack of on the rack of logic." And there's something about yeah, having avoided them for so long that when I've now started going there, spending time with some of the bigger archetypal images, that I've been able to start seeing myself a bit more clearly in a rational way, as well as the kind of mythic bubbling underneath feeling I've had for the last couple of years. And I'm really starting to engage. I've been working with Arthur. I've been working with King Arthur a lot, and Lancelot as a character, as well as being the kind of the pagan fecund from the deep water man, seems to be making the lover and the warrior inseparable. And I'm feeling that. I think it's something there. It's something about my want to overthink and to drive and to fix and machinate. Just being just dissolved and taken care of and absolved by the lover and the warrior kind of doing their thing together, you know. So I've been working a lot with local groups and individuals, and just recognizing the power of taking this out of the head and into the hands. You know, the kind of I've been challenging people to wrestle on the beach when they barely feel comfortable enough to have a conversation, and it just does something. So yeah, there's something there. And I'm about a year and 2 months into having my second boy here. So I'm looking around the room. He's a big part of my answer to where I am, where my life is, what the energy's like in this house at the moment. It's yeah, it's just an outpouring of just gorgeous, furious, beautiful energy here. Yeah, there you go. There's some bits.
Wow, man.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Some interesting threads to pull on there, my friend. Where to begin? My mind just automatically went dancing off towards that archetypal tension between the lover and the warrior.
Yeah.
And I do feel look, I'm not going to get into deep conversations around the Arthurian world with you because you're going to lose me straight away. And let's just put it right out there. Sam, you're coming into our Fifth Direction community next week, next Tuesday, to for a 5 week um, festival of Arthur, I guess. And I can't
Yeah.
wait to hear how that comes out of your jaw, man. I think you mentioned the fact that not many people have kind of heard it in its completeness, in whatever that means. But we have it in kind of fragments, don't we, through our childhood and
Yeah. Yeah.
through Hollywood and everywhere else. So I can't wait just to kind of dive in that way. And Lancelot is definitely one of those characters that's always been intriguing to me. I often talk about the tension arc that's there between archetypes, and the warrior kind of wants boundaries, and the lover wants a boundlessness, and what does that mean?
Yeah, 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 absolutely. And the word on sharing Arthur with your community is I'm an improvisational storyteller, and I think that's what really we mean when we say storyteller, or would like to mean. And there's no rehearsal process that I've come across that feels good. So the process is standing up and seeing what happens. So I'm really looking forward to kind of co-creating it with the community as well and seeing the direction it goes in. And that version of the story will be that version of the story because that's all Arthur can offer us. I think we're playing around with the title of the shapeshifter, and that will be the shape that it's in. Whoever's there, whoever joins, and however it comes is how it comes that time for these times. So. And yeah, if we don't allow some good space for Lancelot, he's going to force us away in anyway. So we might as well be polite to him, and the energy that he's bringing. And I think I'm interested to see if this tracks for you in terms of the sort of the spiritual siblings to the story of King Arthur, which is Dermot and Grania and Finn McCool and the whole Finian cycle. I was lucky enough to join Martin Shaw. He's only about sort of an hour and a half, 2 hours up the road from me. And I'm sure more conversations and meetings to happen there as time goes on. But I was lucky enough to go to his School of Myth in the penultimate year before he sort of changed the shape of it to match his direction these days. And he told us Dermot and Grania, and it's the time I remember just coming apart. Like I couldn't breathe through the snot and the tears and the sort of the drum and the sage and the story space and just not, I didn't bring tissues in, for Christ's sake. Like I had no way of just trying to hold on to all of this kind of effluvia that was coming out of my face. And I just sort of, as soon as he finished and sort of said that's it, I just went out into the night and had to put my stomach on the ground and kind of it was difficult to breathe, and I recognize in the Arthur and Lancelot relationship something about the when love and like romantic erotic love and brotherhood overlap one another, and there's a schism and there's a problem, and the brotherhood does everything it can to survive it, and then eventually in the end can't. That to me, there's something, I can feel it now. There's something about that just undoes me. There's something fundamental about how it would feel for my brothers, my brothers to feel disconnected from them because of some flight of eros between us. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, I do, man. I do. I think you're getting to the crux of it, really. For me too. All this work that we've been doing, the brotherhood, and a lot of the men's work that happens in the fifth direction. I think that's one of the major themes that we're kind of circling around. Um,
Mm.
yeah, I can feel it in you even now. You know.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
yeah. Well, hopefully, I think that's definitely going to be one of the things we're going to be pulling on in this story. I'd imagine, particularly if it's so close to your heart. But it does beg the question, Sam. I feel like we need to kind of rewind just a little bit and ask the big question, which is how on earth did you find yourself telling stories?
Ah, God, like isn't that just? I work with a group called a Band of Brothers over here in England, and it's working with young men who are at risk of the criminal justice system. They've been to prison, or they're on parole, or they're on the street, and it's young men aged 18 to 25. And it involves myth and elderhood and sharing and all the gorgeous stuff. And I always come out of those sessions feeling a similar mix that I've just felt on the back of your question, which is this is gorgeous and poignant and alive, and I can feel it. I can feel it in my fingertips. I can feel it in my chest, and it's so fucking rare, and it's so painfully rare that hiraeth. You come across that word, the Welsh word, the
I don't
yeah,
know it. Tell
the
me.
no, it's one of those untranslatable words that the Welsh use, which is a nostalgia for a home you never had. So the question, how did I get into storytelling? The first thing I want to say, or that I'm trying to say, is why is it so rare? Why is that the appropriate question? How did you find this stranger? How did you get into this place in the from the world out there? So yeah, there's that. But the story is, I was raised on Tolkien. I still remember the BBC production, Ian Holm playing Bilbo, the box of cassettes, and just the visceral, the gorgeous, like feeling terrified when the orcs were nearby, and the dripping of the caves and golems schlocking around the place. And so I got a sense of what myth might be via Tolkien, and I didn't realize until I'm working back through Tree and Leaf again now, but like how rooted in it he really is. But also Robin Hood and Arthur were knocking about as well. But I realize now I never knew the story. They were just ideas. They were kind of maybe archetypes, actually is a good word. Other than that, I had no spiritual belief. I had no organized religion. I remember a deeply Christian friend kind of feeling sort of in a guarded way, quite jealous that he had that and he had that thing to rely on, those roots. And I was also fine. There's a lot of us knocking about. I was an I'm fine guy. Fine job, fine relationship, fine. I said this recently in a different conversation. Damned if I was going to cry in the rom-com. Damned if Jennifer Aniston was going to make me cry. There's no way. I'm too fine for that. And I'm going to just drop this here because I come back to this in a minute. And you'll forgive me. This is a little bit of a circuitous story, but there's a payoff, which is I went to Dartington. I studied theatre at Dartington College of Arts when it was a university. And at the time, this is a really good sort of, if you'd have asked me where I was and I understood what you meant back then, I would have said, in my earnestness, I'm terrified of people judging me. My ego has me by the bollocks. So I was studying theatre and I couldn't do it. I couldn't stand up in front of people and embody a character or an idea because I was too aware of whether my mates would think I was doing it well or not. I was incapable. Fast forward, I don't know, 15 years, and I had my first son, and he came hurtling into the world with a profound brain disorder, and you know the phrase, your gift is in the underworld. It was proper underworld stuff. It was hard, man. It was dark. I was broken, and the beauty of it was that I allowed myself to break. I think I could have bent and then come back to who I was and pushed it all the way down. And nobody knew anything about sort of story. Nobody had any ideas. Nobody really had a grasp on embodiment or really even trauma, really, in that sense. It was cups of tea and hopefully it will get better sort of stuff. But one day my dad pushed my running shoes into my hands and said, "Go for a run." And I remember at the time kind of looking around the room like a rabbit in the headlights, terrified. And I took him up on the offer and I just went into the fields near my house. And I came stamping around a corner and disturbed a flock of jackdaws, blackbirds, and they took off into the air. And they left behind a pigeon with a broken wing. And that image was the first thing that had said to me out of all of my friends and family and whatever I was watching to try to placate myself, that said, yeah, you're actually experiencing this. Yes, there is some brokenness. Yes, there is some left behind. Yes, you are grieving. And I just remember my knees just going into the mud and just bellowing um, at the sky. Um, and simultaneously, I was working for a group called the Bioleadership Project, who were working with nature to try and upend some of the broken systems, and bumped into Martin Shaw's work, and then watched a video of Danny Deardorff telling a Van and Grey Wolf. Holy shit, man! Like, that inrushing of stuff that the nature image had given me in the purest sense in myth. And by the way, one of the videos I saw of Martin Shaw and Danny Deardorff was at Dartington whilst I was studying there on the same campus, whilst the fine guy was off, drinking booze and playing football. And so I saw it was possible. I saw it was possible. I saw the healing power of it. I went to Martin's school 5 or 6 years later. I don't know how many times I've stood in front of audiences, as if I've just chosen the word audiences. I dislike the word participants of that sort of experience. I have an organization now with a small team called Recalling Fire, where we do it. I've worked with organizations, gone into consultants' rooms, and shared the image that Danny Deardorff evoked and gave to me that's been so powerful about the crossroads. And now, excitingly, and I guess this is the loop back around again, telling King Arthur, doing the work of getting past the books and the stories which were obsessed with what was real. Where was King Arthur? When was it? Where was Camelot? Was Merlin real? Was he attached to Glastonbury? These sorts of things. Because, and this is the punchline, I've come to recognize that I was trying to make sense of the world and of my life. And I have now come to realize, and why I dedicate myself to story, is that I don't believe that we make sense. I believe that we experience sense with our senses, but we do make meaning. And so that's what I'm in it for. And it's the triple threat of story. It's the peace to go there. It's the wisdom to hear it from somewhere else, some other place, and it's the courage to go and actually do something about it. I think that's something about why and something about how. Yeah, yeah,
Ooh, I feel like I need to take a few deep breaths after that one, man.
yeah, yeah.
What a beautiful rendering of you and how you arrived in this moment, I guess. Um, wow, I really just want to honor
Mm.
that for a minute. I think you covered a lot of ground, but you did it with a lot of grace. And I firstly just want to recognize the boldness and the strength in that share. Thank you, brother. I really appreciate that,
Yeah,
and the vulnerability that's there too. That image of the jackdaws flying off and leaving behind, the winged pigeon is extraordinary, isn't it? Um,
yeah, yeah, yeah. And at the risk of barreling straight through the pause that you've just so gracefully given
mm,
us. Hmm, actually, I don't want to do that unthinkingly. Yeah, yeah. There was a parallel. There's a parallel that's been unfolding itself simultaneously, and it was the recognition that the job of the honesty that came from that image and pause in the way that you're representing here, and the sideways ungrabbable, ununderstandable nature of myth, I came to recognize the role that was missing from my life was the elder.
mm.
There was no elder that would have been giving me that image, that would have been telling me the story that didn't make sense but was full of meaning. And I'd be really interested to see how much story works. I mean, I'd love to know your experience. I'd love to know how much story work tracks against discovering the idea of elderhood. Like
Mm.
you can't, I judge you can't hang around with myth for very long without starting to wonder about the idea of elderhood.
Well, I agree. I mean, the image itself is an elder, right? I mean, if we
Yeah,
think how long that image or a similar image has been around. I'm sure that many a man has been arrested by that image or another just like it. And it's an elder in and of itself. And I think
Yeah.
part of the reason that it stops us in our tracks is because there's a recognition of the elder within us.
Mm.
As Jung would say, the 2 million-year-old being that exists inside us, and coming into communion with that part of ourselves. And I often find that these images, when we recognize them in that way, there's a sense of making contact with that part of yourself, um, which just kind of opens its arms wide and says, "See."
Yeah, yeah. Gorgeous.
Mm.
That's beautiful. Thank you for that. Mm.
Because I do think
Yeah.
quite often we at least, I'm going to say I here, but as a young man, I definitely went out into the world looking for some kind of male, role model slash elder, something that I didn't have in a healthy way in my youth. But I felt to some degree like I was searching in the wrong places, and I was also looking for this imaginal man in my head that was, quote unquote perfect. So, the minute they put a foot wrong, I went into this big cycle of, all men are the same and this and that and the other, and a lack of trust.
Mm.
Um, so, that image that you presented there, it kind of wakes me up to a different way of understanding what elderhood really means.
Yeah, well, man, this has been sort of my waking thought for the last couple of years has been about this, the opportunity of elderhood in our times
Mm,
when the over 65s are the fastest growing cohort in the developed modern West and hold most of the land and the power and the opportunity and the time and the so on. And yet we play with ideas like retirement and
mm,
endless golf and cruises. And there's some opportunity there, I think. And you've just helped me to spin that around as well. And
mm,
yeah, the nature has been a big part of my practice. And yeah, recognizing it in just as sharp terms as that, as the elder to say, see,
mm,
is yeah, really helpful. The young men that we work with in Band of Brothers, I remember in the mentor training that they gave us, they had this. There was this line. It was something like, "All of these young men have got one thing in common." I'm already on tenterhooks when somebody says something like that. Go on, I dare you to cast aspersions and make a generalization. I dare you. But it was absolved when they said they've all got incredible bullshit radars. They know when you're being yourself or not. That's it. That's it. Because they've experienced, not to a man, but largely they've experienced the life of people being paid to look after them, or to tell them they're not in trouble, or to mollycoddle, or to fix, or to rescue, or whatever else. So our training has been in your role as a mentor, slash elder, which has a different term within that organization in particular. But the training is, how are you going to do your work so you can actually show up?
mm,
And and I really love the overlap between nature and elderhood here in the way that there are some folks who would be, and we could get into the weeds here about what an elder is and how an elder comes to be, but there are some older folks who might be, passing some nefarious agenda and doing something that's not helpful to the youth. Yes. And there's something gorgeous in the opportunity of overlapping elder and nature to the point where imagine sitting at the foot of a 3,000-year-old yew tree. Doesn't really matter what it says. You can just bask in its life experience. You can just bask in the fact that it's, every old person, however you judge them, or however much work you've done to be less judgmental, they still have done time. They have still been around the sun. They, in the very fact that they're an older animal, there's something to be gained from just witnessing, I think, and observing and
mm,
being near to
mm.
that transcends the judgments of how racist are they or whatever else might be something close to hand. So yeah, I think you've just helped me to double down on the nature and elder inquiry, and I don't think this is an end to it.
No, and thank you, man,
Yeah.
because as you're speaking, I'm just finding lots of great stuff arising in my mind in ways I hadn't thought about it before. But there's this idea for me. You talked about the bullshit radar.
Yeah,
That really landed with me.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
yeah, I feel like I understand exactly what that means. But so what is an elder then? I mean, let's not kind of pull that apart too closely. But one thing you could say is somebody who's closer to becoming themselves, and that way the bullshit radar, you know,
yeah,
is
yeah.
kind of, it won't go off. Let's put it that way, as much. Because if we talk about this road to becoming a man or becoming a human is all about getting closer and closer to becoming yourself. Well, an elder is
Yeah,
necessarily that little bit closer, but
yeah,
it's a
yeah,
recognition of that, and that's why we talk about the difference between an elder and an older.
yeah,
Like I'd suggest an older is somebody who's maybe no closer to becoming themselves than they were when they were a lot younger. There's a
yeah,
kind of revealing, if you will. So it's not so much
yeah,
what's said; it's more you don't have to say anything at all, and the bullshit radar won't go off as quickly. There's
yeah,
something you
yeah,
said
yeah,
there
yeah,
about
yeah,
retirement,
yeah,
man, Sam. Before I let
yeah,
you go, but I really want to say something about that because I think there's this sense that you retire into elderhood, and just that's an oxymoron right there. Like you have to claim elderhood, and you have to actually do something quite specific, and it's hard work. You can't just it's not just a factor of age.
yes,
Um, I remember, I think it was Stephen Jenkinson. He was saying, ask a grandfather if they're an elder, they'd probably say yes. But what did they actually do to to claim that? Well, you know, their son had a child. It's got nothing to do with them,
yes,
right? In
yes,
many
yeah, yeah,
respects.
yeah, yeah.
Yet they claim some sort of and so maybe it's not about and maybe it's should we go for we're talking about wheels here. So rather than retire into elderhood, maybe it's a retread.
Well, I've been playing around with this opportunity. There's two pieces of low-hanging fruit. Look, I know that our pasts have parallel lines in them, and I would suspect that language, uh, powerful language that both sounds great and serves a purpose is in your wheelhouse and part of your joy. A side note here, if somebody asks me what they should call their shop or whatever, and it's they're selling this and it's in this place, that's me gone for hours. Even though it shouldn't be. But the two pieces of low hanging fruit as the language is concerned here is one is retirement or refirement. What's the opportunity here? Like if one of the things we're most afraid of at that age is a loss of purpose, come on, like
Mm,
fire the fire. And the other one is which I think ties us back around again, actually, is expect your elders rather than respect your elders. So I think part of elderhood is you can't be an elder of nothing, right? You have to be an elder of something in the way you can't be initiated into just something. You're initiated into a specific idea or community. I'm just starting to work with a village hall that's not far from where I live, and I'm trying to figure out how to get olders and youngers in the same room because I judge that part of the work of the day is for young people to understand that the power is in their hands to bless their elders in and
mm,
to go around looking for them and say, you know what, I judge you to be an elder. So are you willing to step up to the plate? And this is how I do it. And part of the kind of campaigning around that is expect your elders. Go out looking. Go and see if you're blown away by the way someone's behaving. And at the same time, I think there's something about the older people today, the eldering work that I've done as a younger, the eldering work that I've done around kind of challenging people who I think could be really, they kind of pre-elder. I said, what would it happen to you if I blessed you if I called you an elder? I just did it. How does that feel to you? There's a Rabbi Zalman Shakhtar Salomi, who's part of the Saging International, or started Saging International, has this beautiful piece where he talks about how are you going to receive that
mm,
as an older person? How are you going to be, rather than deferring and saying, oh no, don't talk about me like that, how are you going to hold that in your body and accept it? Where's the grace here? And I think part of the work is that the older people who are alive today, in my community, let me just say that much, weren't raised with elders in the way that I'm playing around with the idea of elderhood. So in a way, they sort of can't fully become, maybe, because they weren't ever younger among elders. But if they can pretend pre-10, pre-stretch, if they can have a go, then my kids can see a model of that. So that by the time that they get to that age, they can say they had a model of it. So that by the time those grandchildren come up, and so we start playing around with an intergenerational response to an intergenerational wound. You know, I can't help thinking of the Grail King and the father of the Grail King and the wound and the wound and the wound. And there's something really pacifying about being part of an idea that I think is going to take the 7 generations we talk about,
Mm,
rather than something that can be fixed, you know, by strategizing over the next 4 years.
mm. No, I think that's beautiful, man. And I'm thinking of Yeats, to bless and be blessed. I love. I think that's a missing piece. That it's got to be,
Yeah.
it's a two-way street here.
Yeah, man. Nice.
And that's a beautiful idea. And it actually, it begs the question with the community recalling fire. Are you seeing that youngers and olders coming together and that kind of is that happening within that community?
So, I I'm hesitant to call it well, it is a community, but it's not an intact. We've 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 not found a model that works to make it sustainable to have constant rolling events and I tried to treat it as a way to keep the lights on in my house for a while, and that was not a good game for me to be playing. So there's work to do to make it something that's sustainable and constant. But in the microcosm, every single event itself, absolutely. I mean, feeding the story as a practice, so that
Mm,
I can say as an 18-year-old girl in university something really true that's happening to me, even though maybe I don't really understand even why or what the languages I'm using, and a septuagenarian retiree conservative bloke on the other side of the room can say, "Shit, the same thing's happening to me." I'm That was the same image for me. Can we, seeing those little moments of crossover and a kind of optimistic turbulence, between two people that don't really even know the language their psyches are speaking to each other. Yeah, I felt that massively several times in different, and like hearing people shorthanding the language, walking from one part of an event to another event and just hearing them just speaking in terms of crossroads and wolf and horse and
mm,
never quite getting down to what they actually mean or what they're actually representing. So there's this safety around it being unsaid in the way that it's being said.
mm,
Um,
mm.
yeah, and I'm interested to see if myth is the only place, that happens. I suspect food, poetry, music, dance, I suspect they all have that in their genes, a transcendence of the day to day.
But I think it's anything that you could put broadly under the language of soul, right?
Yeah,
Anything that comes
yeah,
from that
yeah,
kind of creative inner tends to have that facility about it that kind of
yeah,
transcends the everyday words.
yeah,
Because yeah, we've certainly seen that too at the Fifth Direction, and also we've definitely seen that there's some beautiful kind of eldering happen, organically, which is really beautiful. Like I'll get wind of an older man who's taken a younger one under his wing, so to speak, and there's been no direct directive for that to happen. It just kind of begins to happen, and I think that it's story and just the holding of the community itself, which kind of just promotes that naturally, which is
yeah,
it's a
yeah.
beautiful thing to see. It's a really beautiful thing to see. So
I'm so happy to see the what you've got there and to be touching it and to be part of what you have. And there's something about the kind of just the fidelity, the spaces here over time.
mm, mm.
If you've spent time with Martin Shaw's work, you've no doubt come across Old Kitner. You know the story of Old Kitner,
I
and
certainly
there's the
do. Yeah.
image
Mm,
and the image of the daughter and the wife going on a journey that the husband can't go on, and then coming home and he's still dancing and still drumming, and that hits me in the same way that I was trying to describe about brothers and Eros coming between them. I think that might even be the other side of the same coin. The love, the everyday love, the fidelity to just being there and showing up. Yeah, I bless you, man, for that, and I really hope that's part of my journey too. I
mm,
think maybe Band of Brothers is part of the scope of that actually. But yeah, a rare thing, and again connected to the elder story. I think coming around the
Mm,
corner and seeing the same old person in the community still sweeping the drive 30
mm,
years on. You know, there's something about that in the way that sitting at the foot of a yew gives you some information about the world.
mm,
Um,
mm.
yeah, yeah,
There's a beautiful story that one of our elders tells called "Fire on the Mountain," which is just a wonderful story. About the way an elder sort of operates in the world. It's quite beautiful. It's just as you were speaking there, it just came very strongly through to me. So yeah, look, it's
mm,
a beautiful discussion, man, and I think I don't know, but I'm feel to kind of honor you as a father as well. We kind of brushed over that very important event in your life, the birth of your firstborn son, and I can imagine that was
yeah,
in some ways an initiation into maybe an emerging elder, if nothing else, in the elderhood discussion. And then I kind of wonder, you mentioned the aliveness in your heart of the second son now, having preoccupied your more recent times. And I'm kind of wondering, if it's a question that can be asked or even answered, that the kind of interplay between the
yeah,
experiences of the first and the second born, and I I don't even know what the question is, but let me just leave that
yeah,
hanging for you to
yeah,
speak
yeah,
into.
yeah, yeah. I'm receiving it. The question, and it's there's a lot. There's a lot here. There's a lot here. When my firstborn came into the world, um, fuck, just simultaneously, like I said to you, I didn't keep a religion. I didn't feel safe around a word like spirituality. Cult was the closest word to me in that way. And yet, the only words I found to describe what it was like to be in the presence of a birth was that I felt myself physically pressed towards the edge of the room by something bigger than me. And part of my journey is that if I'd have done my work, by the time the second birth came around, I'd have been down on my knees and keening, and not worrying about the judgment of the hospital staff. But I didn't. I politely cried. So my firstborn came into the world with this. It was the thing I was most afraid of. I don't know why. I'm so far from disability. I carry a lot of shame. No, I don't anymore. I've worked with the shame that I had for being in a supermarket, for instance, and seeing somebody with severe disability doing repeated movements and maybe drooling and making guttural sounds, and like I'd feel like repulsed. I had this sickness because I had no sense of disability. I wasn't raised anywhere near it, and it was one of the things I feared the most was having a disabled child. That's I can tell you a story that kind of maybe it's for another time, but it's irrefutably one of the biggest shadows I had in my life. And then here he came. And he came into the world, this the biggest challenge, the biggest fear that I had, a guttural, proper fear, in the shape of this gorgeous little being, just emanating so much light that I was physically pushed to the back of the room in the birth. And he's still with us and he's still going strong. And he's a beautiful boy. He's got sharp blue eyes and a pile of curls on the top of his head. He's who I imagine when Ivan comes back to life again in the story of Ivan and Grey Wolf. And so the work has unfolded. I've seen myself. I've seen my father. And we've seen each other, and we can't come away from a hug without wet shoulders after years and years of not crying, and his father not crying, and his father not crying. And so there's this beauty here. And he didn't really develop beyond the point we're guessing of about 6 months. So he's a 5-year old with about a 6 month development. And it turns out we're really, really good at looking after 6 month olds, even when they're 15 kilos. Um, and so as soon as our second born got to the 7 month point, we're in this dichotomy of blessing everything that our firstborn gave us whilst also wanting to celebrate the journey of the second kid. So it's this constant fluidity of motion, of joy, and I think it probably started when my firstborn came along, the kind of heart-rending change, the physical change that I felt. allowed me to hold both possibilities at the same time, you know. Saying
Mm.
I'm fine is one possibility, and that's what I was stuck on for a long time. And I was going to say something earlier when you were talking about an elder being someone that was coming closer to themselves. Man, here we are talking to each other from across the world in the shape of a Zoom, but also as a podcast and as a, you know, and there's a phrase that bubbles up to me, which I'm really interested to see how this lands with you and anyone who's listening to this. I understand that we've done our time and we've done our research and we've done our work and we have the language in us, and the ability here, and the technological know-how to be on a call and all the rest of it. And there's an acupuncture point around how close to the work we've gotten, which is this phrase "know it all." This, like, what does that do to you? Like, I squirm or like to think there might be someone, you know, who gauges me as that, as a know-it-all, and that's part of what's coming out of it. Is a recognition of like, okay, that is one of the things that I'm afraid of being, and it probably is because I am a bit like that and have been for many years. But in terms of doing my work, I think I can wax lyrical about what it's been like, and I can give you some images about what it's been like to have these two completely different and the same boys in my house. But if I'm honest with you, man, I just don't know yet. I just
Mm.
don't know yet. If I'm honest with you, I still don't believe that he's real, the second boy. If I'm honest with you, I still grieve for the years I lost not feeling. If I'm honest with you, I miss the moments with my wife where we can be just ourselves. And yet my house is awash in light and beauty and love, and I'm falling over myself to experience it every day.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah,
Wow. Wow. That's beautiful. Thank you, man. It's the beginning of so many stories. That's what I'm left with. Like the
mm,
trajectory that you and your wife are on is the beginning of so many myths. You know,
yeah,
the birth in that sense, that way. I
yes,
mean, it's
yeah,
almost
yeah, yeah.
Jung talked about this idea of the fundamental question to ask yourself is, what myth am I living? I think
Mm.
it feels very close for you. Um, Not so much an answer to the question that's too concrete, but just to be in the mystery of it. Mm,
Hell yeah,
mm, mm.
yeah, 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 yeah. I have one last thing on that.
Please.
There's a book um called "The Courage to Be Disliked," and I've only just finished it and I'm still new to the ideas and I'm still feeling like it's potent and don't want to buy it wholesale just in case. But if I understand it correctly, there's the idea of teleology.
Mm,
Um, and so I've been given this sense, and thank you for calling it a myth and a story. And you know, I immediately go to who's the third son then? uh, if not literally who's the third son, physically who's the third son. But my story for the last few years has been that my firstborn changed me. And after having read this book, The Courage to Be Disliked, and it's ultimately about connection, by the way, if anyone wants to pick it up, it's a gorgeous thing. Was maybe actually I was desperate to change already. And when he came along, I just had the excuse to change my story.
mm,
So peace, wisdom, great. You know, they're beautiful things and soul work, like you say, and connected to myth. But it's that third strand that I'm really interested in these days. And I hope that our journey can carry on together towards, which is the word courage.
mm,
The courage to be disliked, the courage from mythology, the courage to recognize the myth, the story that we're in, you know, to recognize the story that I was in was one that I could just change overnight.
mm,
There's a palliative care nurse called Bronnie Ware who wrote an article that the Guardian picked up and it went world famous. She's a world famous author now, and she charted the top five regrets of the dying. And the number one was, I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me, which is Baba Yaga saying, did you come here of your own free will or of the will of others? And the only appropriate answer is both and neither.
Mm, mm, yeah.
But the other one that hits me and I think speaks to this story of the kind of waiting for the opportunity to change one's story is one of the top five regrets of people on their deathbed was, I wish I let myself be happy.
Mm,
I wish I just let myself be happy. It was that easy.
mm,
It was that easy, and it was that story. And so I don't think now, well, maybe I do. I'm still fresh to it, but there's something about my firstborn giving me the opportunity to change,
mm,
but not that he was such a fracture that I had to change myself on a psyche level, but that I was gagging for it actually. And the moment came.
mm. Yeah. So he didn't make it happen, but he showed you that it had always been possible, and it was what you always
Yeah,
wanted.
yeah,
Something like that. Yeah, that's beautiful, man.
yeah,
And yeah, yeah, the top regrets of the dying. They're actually, she speaks them in very kind of plain English, but they're all mythical. They're all mythic, in that sense. I'm immediately. I've been quoting Jung a bit in this conversation for some reason, but I immediately think, he said something along the lines of, if you don't tell the world who you are, then the world will tell you.
yeah,
And
yes,
it's just that.
yeah,
Um, you know,
yeah,
can you speak your desires? Um,
yes,
you know, which again takes me to all the lindworm and everything else. It's like go to the corner of the palace gardens and and speak your desire into that double-handed cup.
yeah.
Um, what do you really want? Like, I think if you ask most people that question, I'm generalizing again, but it's actually hard to answer. And I
Well,
think when go on.
yeah, I was just gonna hop back into Bronnie Ware again and recognize the language that she's using was, I wish I live a life true to myself.
Mm,
So what I want is true to myself.
mm,
Okay. So what does that mean? And I think the kind of, I don't know if there's an answer. I think that's the beauty of elderhood, of nature, of myth, is that the best questions mean more questions, right? But part of that line of questioning is, where's the reflective material?
mm,
Rather than trying to guess, there's this lovely metaphor that you don't see wind, you just see the way it impacts itself upon the world. You don't ever see wind, you just see the leaves moving, you see the waves forming. I posit that you never actually see yourself, but you see the way you impact yourself on the world. So that
mm,
then the job, I judge, is to go out looking for the reflective material, recognizing, observing. You're no stranger to meditation, Asher, but the space of the observer around the way that one is impacting on the world, and I think mythology is it's reflective material in the purest sense. It's reflective material that's ancestral. I think time in nature, volunteering, recognizing how bit like accepting blessings rather than brushing them off and saying, no, no, that's not me. That's, I couldn't possibly have accepted that. There's something about the opportunity of conceiving of oneself as unseeable aside from other people. What is it? Desmond Tutu talks about Ubuntu and
mm,
saying, "I am because you are." Right? That's simply the only way. The only way is the other.
mm, the sort of I
But it,
I thou frame. Mm.
yes, yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah,
beautiful. Yeah, and look, we're kind of circling back to the idea that that reflective material, well, that's the image, and when we get a glimpse of that, again, back to the crows and the pigeon with the
yeah. See,
broken wind,
see,
it's wing. That's
see.
there it is. That's the reflective material, which,
Yeah,
yes, is obviously in such great personal abundance in these public dreams, which are myth and story.
yeah,
Mm,
yeah, 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 yeah. Absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely.
Wow, man,
Mm.
I'm yeah. We could talk for hours. This is the thing. We might have to have a part one and part two with regards to this
Yeah,
conversation. But
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'd love you to kind of fold this, back into the Arthur story, and I guess from a personal perspective, you must be finding yourself again and again. in the telling of this enormous piece of work. And I wonder kind of how that's been for you. And is it revelatory? And we've talked about this, Arthur being the great shapeshifter king. So each time you tell it, it's coming out of your jaw differently. And I imagine it's more revealing personally. Would that be
Yeah.
true?
Yes. 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 Yeah. Absolutely true. I think the first avalanche was what I was hinting at earlier, was that we we receive Arthur in this sort of pseudo historical shape. He's a sort of he's got the same sort of outline as Boudica. He's got a semblance of history to him, but also not at all. And Arthur, it seems to be through all of the different versions of the story, was whatever he needed to be at the time. You've got the kind of the Vulgate and the post-Vulgate cycles are a great example of a character that's rescued by the people and becomes a pagan champion, and Lancelot comes out of the works and walks out of the lake, and then it kind of gets rescued again by the church, rescued or whatever, absolved, and all of a sudden everybody's in St. Paul's Cathedral when Excalibur arrives. Well, no, actually, when the Sword and the Stone arrives, and everybody's taking mass, and the place to sleep is the Hermitage, and so it was that membrane that took me so long to get through, which was the source material. There is some great story work out there, but there's also a lot of history work out there, which is more concerned with claiming the name of it, claiming the space, claiming the bridge, claiming the castle. And I was just carrying around this huge ball of just disappointment that the story of my place, the story of my people, arguably, and Cornwall and England, is just unattainable. You just can't get your hands around it. And then I just leant back into the good old teachings. I think it was again Martin Shaw telling the story of the world falling out of Wolverine's asshole, and kind of going, oh, okay, I've just taken meaning from that story, so I don't need it to make sense. In the same way that Vass, who's is sort of in and around the community at the moment, whose incredible story of kind of spending 10 years in a monastic setting, and then coming to the school of myth, and talking to me about grace, and kind of how uninterested he is in the question of, do you believe? That's, belief, and is it real, and does it make sense, isn't close to, yeah, but are you feeling, how is that doing for you? So I picked up this book. Oh, Beatrice Clay, the author was, kind of in that era of people rewriting the stories so that we could kind of understand them a bit more simply. She basically rewrote all of the Mort d'Arthur, and just took out the bits that she was interested in, put some nice images against it. I got this access to the story. Fuck, it's coming to me as a story now. The images are speaking to me rather than the whens and the was it real. And then the floodgates just opened. And then I started getting myself closer to the source material. I went to Geoffrey of Monmouth. I went to Christian de Troyes. I started reading the stuff that kind of it's all based on. And yeah, it does keep revealing itself in me. And I think the point I made at the top, the warrior and the lover having such close overlap, the kind of the rageful sexual energy of Lancelot, when the blood is rising to his cheeks, and he's covered in white armor, covered in other people's blood, and he's doing it all for Guinevere, and he goes absolutely insane and disappears into the woods for years at a time when he can't quite have her love. And there's something about how helpful that has been for me in terms of recognizing where the overlaps are.
Mm.
My magician is very active, so I know what fear means. So when I want to rebalance that, and I want to get myself closer to grief and anger, here comes the Knight of Knights, right, riding towards the situation. And I think there are many images, but the thing that's coming to my mind at the moment in response to your question is just the great sense of injustice. The kind of might is right. The commoners aren't mentioned; they're just drubbed, driven into the ground. there's a lot of powerful masculine energy and quite a lot of apologism around the feminine references. There's quite a lot of sign. There's a sort of mismatch of energies and an overbalancing of the court and the horse and the sword and the lance. You know, it's so big it doesn't fit on the screen anymore. And I just yeah, I'm interested to see how that interacts with your community and with other communities to see how that what images might fold out of that in terms of the balance of the masculine and feminine, and also just recognizing it in the times that I live in and that I was raised in. And I'm interested in a better world. I'm interested in the crazy story that we're living in at the moment.
Mm.
And I hear time and time again from sources better than me that the support work is an important role, you know, for the lesser heard voices. And so I'm really wrestling with my, you know, with my heritage and my race and my privilege and my sexuality and my gender and where I am in the world and how far away I am from chaos, relatively speaking, and how much of a place of privilege that is. So yeah, that's an inquiry and it's open and raw, and alive in these stories. You know, it's there isn't an answer, so it's good that it's a playing field, I think.
Mm. Mm. Yeah,
Yeah,
there isn't an answer, so it's good that there's a playing field. Yes, I love that,
yeah.
man. And you know, I think for anybody listening to this ahead of your telling, we're getting a little glimpse as to what this might be like, this particular playing field,
Yeah.
with you carrying it. And I can't wait. I really can't wait. I'm particularly interested in the nourishing and the feeding of the story as well, because you know, obviously we'll have a great community there of all genders, and I think it's just going to be wonderful to kind of tease out some of these images and just see where it lands. Because you're absolutely right. I think the story is one thing, but the setting in which it's told is so important. Also, we've got this kind of matrix in these stories of the spirit of the depths and the spirit of the times, um, which are both at play here. Um, can't wait to see where it all goes, man. The
Yeah,
stitch and the
yeah,
cross stitch.
likewise.
Mm.
Yeah. Cross stitch, good word.
Mm.
And I think that's what I'm aiming at. You know, we passed a few notes back and forth to each other, but it's good to kind of say it here to you and candidly. The kind of, I think the phrase I used was watered wine. There's going to be moments where we just sit down and let it breathe for a minute, and I'm almost more interested in that than you know how the story itself unfolds. There's real opportunity here and even just the odd image, and I do think honoring the shape of it so that there's a sense of like, okay, I've got more of a sense of how Arthur, you know, played and some of the big images. But yeah, I'm really interested in this co-creation and this participation in it rather than a kind of
Mm.
yeah, a telling and a receiving, as it were. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you know, as you know, these are kind of alchemical situations. And it's interesting, even when you talk about all the images we've spoken about on this have had that alchemical kind of essence to them. You know, I'm thinking of the, you know, the red, the black, and the white, and the yellow, and these
Yeah.
strong colors that keep coming through. And yeah, I hope people listening are kind of willing to enter the dance.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, the music's starting, and I'll have my hand out. So let's see how
Yeah,
we go.
beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a great place to leave it, man. I just want to end by thanking you, really, you know, from the middle of my chest. I am so thoroughly enjoying getting to deepen our connection. Rather, you know, I've there are so many people that are floating around my world, whether they're members of the Fifth Direction community and out and beyond, who speak so highly of you and the gift that you're bringing. Um, so yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and thank you for that little another little bit of reflective material. And just the astonishing overlaps and you know, how can it be that we live in a time where I'm sat here in Cornwall and you're over there in Australia and yet this still goes on?
Well,
Yeah,
Sam, I've
yeah,
got to jump in there and say, you know, because my heritage on my father's side
yeah,
is
yeah,
deeply
yeah,
Cornish. So, you know,
yeah,
I imagine that
yeah,
in the place you're sitting right now, you know, our forefathers may have been down the road in the local tavern. Who knows?
yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
There's a
Can
lot
only
of there's a
wonder
lot
what
of
they were. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of interweaving here, which is happening. I spent some time as a younger man, traipsing my way around Cornwall, trying to get a bit of a feel for my father and my father's father and every man that stood behind them. And then on my mother's side, it's into the Slavic mythological cycle. So I feel um, incredibly blessed when it comes to story. Mm.
Yeah, and you've just put your finger again on the word, I think.
Yeah,
Alchemy. Alchemy,
yeah,
alchemy. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Gorgeous.
yeah. All right, man. Until soon.
Awesome. Nice
Mm.
one. Cheers, Arthur.